Welcome to the Falling Tower, where we talk about declining society and rising up to confront the politically incorrect problems of the modern world. Since this is the first episode, I'd like to start off by explaining the purpose of this podcast. First is to make news articles more accessible to an audience that might not have the time to sit down and read this, to make it into a more audio format, and I'm looking to possibly expand this not just to news articles, but to posts from 8chan Poll and my posting career that has lots of interesting ideas that may not be accessible, at least not as easily, as something that would be in an audio format that you could listen to while, say, cleaning your room, which is great advice, by the way, as anyone who's a fan of Jordan Peterson knows. So, today's towers to topple include importing third world doctors and their shitty behavior, a University of Melbourne speaker casts a spell on all-male conference panels, and in Libya, Facebook is used to kill people. So we're going to start off with the lattermost of these. This is an article from the seattletimes.com, and the proper title is, "In Libya, Facebook is used to buy arms, locate foes, and kill them." The link to this article and all other articles will be in the description if you want to read the whole thing for yourself, but my whole thing here is to be able to read it for you. So let's begin. When a new bout of fighting between rival militias engulfed the Libyan capital in recent days, badly shaking the fragile United Nations-backed government, some combatants picked up rifles and rocket launchers and headed into the streets. Others logged on to Facebook. As rockets rained on parts of Tripoli, hitting a hotel popular with foreigners and forcing the airport to close, and 400 prisoners escaped from a jail, a parallel battle unfolded online. On their Facebook pages, rival groups issued boasts, taunts, and chilling threats, one vowing to purify Libya of its opponents. Some keyboard warriors, as Facebook partisans are known in Libya, posted fake news or hateful comments. Others offered battlefield guidance over Facebook, mind you. Battlefield guidance over Facebook. On one discussion page on Thursday, a user posted maps and coordinates to help target her side's bombs at a rival airbase. Then it goes into a short block quote explaining how someone gave coordinates over Facebook. Social media enjoys outsized influence in Libya, a sparsely populated yet violently fractured country that is torn by a plethora of armed groups vying for territory and legitimacy. They battle for dominance on the streets and on smartphones. But Facebook, by far the most popular platform, does not just mirror the chaos. It can act as a force multiplier. Armed groups use Facebook to find opponents and critics. If some plucky rebels over in Libya can use Facebook to coordinate these sorts of attacks and monitor you, imagine what the CIA can do. Imagine what properly organized government groups can do with this data to track down critics and potentially kill them. I mean, that's what's going on in Libya right now. So don't think that it's outside of the realm of possibility for an ethically questionable government entity to be able to do this to its own people in the West. Armed groups use Facebook to find opponents and critics, some of whom have later been detained, killed, or forced into exile, according to human rights groups and Libyan activists. Swaggering commanders boast of their battlefield exploits and fancy vacations, or rally supporters by sowing division and ethnic hatred. Another aside, you see little trigger words in publications like this that are trying to gaslight you in, oh, they're doing a really bad thing here, and it's sowing division and ethnic hatred. Because we all know that unity is peacefulness, which, I mean, the globalists are trying to push a unity narrative where unity is good and where having sovereign nations and sovereign ethnicities is bad. So just something to point out is that this is not a neutral news source. This is Seattle Times. If you've ever been to Seattle, you know that they're heavily left-leaning, and pretty much all of the Western media is heavily left-controlled. world. So I'm not surprised to see this gaslighting here, because they do have a narrative to push, and one of those lines within that narrative is that ethnic hatred is evil. But they would never point out that, hey, these muzzies fucking hate Christians, and that is a very long-standing both ethnic and religious hatred. It's not just a religious division thing, because they hate white culture, they hate Western culture, and we're not doing a very good job of defending ourselves here in the West, because a lot of our own people, a lot of our fellow whites and actual whites are disgusted by the West because they're gaslit into self-hatred. And that should be pointed out as well, that self-hatred is a kind of ethnic hatred. You can be racist against yourself. Try bringing that one up to a lefty. See how they mentally backflip out of that one. Back to the article. Forged documents circulate widely, often with the goal of undermining Libya's few surviving national institutions, notably its central bank. Oy vey! Facebook is coming under scrutiny globally for how its platform amplifies political manipulation and violence. In July, the company began culling misinformation from its pages in response to episodes in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and India, where online rumors led to real-life violence against ethnic minorities. This is questionable at best. I mean to say that whether or not Facebook is really cleaning up its act, I mean, they're just shutting down dissidents. There have been mass shuttenings of anyone that says anything conservative or anything that runs against the globalist agenda out there. And anything that you say that is trying to defend your culture, trying to keep your culture from being deracinated, from becoming rootless, from giving in to globalism and consumerism, replacing, well, that's a big problem, is consumerism replacing a sense of traditional identity. A lot of Westerners are going through an identity crisis where the younger generation doesn't have anything solid and anything meaningful to latch on to and to identify with. So if you support having a healthy, rooted, meaningful identity, then you're racist. Because race is fundamental. It's part of who we are. Our culture is fundamental. It's our lineage. It's our history. It's who our people are. But no, all that is racist. It's terrible. So in short, I don't believe that Facebook is cleaning up its act, but it's certainly trying to sell itself. Like, oh, we're getting rid of all this fake news, so please come back to our platform. Please notice me, user senpai. When you realize how feeble and cucky this behavior is, well, you have to realize that Facebook needs a large base of users to be of any use, and it's an addictive freaking platform. I mean, the thing that they're selling is dopamine hits from notifications and from being egocentric and indulging in, oh, look at how my latte looks that I got at Starbucks this morning. It's feeding off of egotism and off of short-term gratification, and they need a lot of people to constantly be engaged in that behavior to be able to function. So the more people that get woke on how unhealthy Facebook is and how it does not facilitate real communication, and it does facilitate massive disinformation at the same time as putting your personal information at risk and your personal activities at risk, and it's just on the internet forever where people can like dig something up and blackball you if you post an unpopular opinion, God forbid. So more and more people are realizing the risks involved and how it's just not a good means of living. It's not a good means of spending your time. Well, especially when we realize that in-person communication is much more fundamental. So, I mean, a lot of people are addicted to the Facebergs, but we're going to move on past this controlled social media as it is. This cannot be sustained. This cannot continue. Back to the article. On Wednesday, Facebook's chief operating officer, Sheryl Sandberg, will defend the company's efforts to limit disinformation and hate speech before the Senate Intelligence Committee, where she will testify along with Jack Dorsey, Twitter's chief executive. Facebook insists it's assiduously policing... They're using fake fucking gay words. Facebook is insisting that it's addressing the problem with how Libyans are using its platform to commit these acts of violence in a widespread and systematic manner. Back to directly quoting the article here. Facebook, employs teams of Arabic-speaking content reviewers to enforce its policies. It's developing artificial intelligence to preemptively remove prohibited content, and it partners with local organizations and international human rights groups to better understand the country. Aside, I need to address this. So they're making bots to remove prohibited content. They're making bots to remove hate speech. And they're definitely doing this with the English-speaking part of Facebook because there's so much data to be collected upon the English-speaking world. It's the main language on the internet. And we've seen plenty of conservative speakers be shadow banned. If you say anything unpopular, you can get kicked off of Facebook really quickly for going against the Globo Homo agenda. Furthermore, international human rights groups. Okay, whenever that comes up, whenever you hear international human rights groups, that should go off in your head. It's meddling internationally with various countries, meddling with their social affairs while parading around as these humble saviors, these wonderful philanthropists who are throwing money left and right to get their own agendas pushed forward. But it's all done under the guise of human rights. For example, with Libya here, these human rights groups would allegedly be trying to remove hate speech when what they're trying to actually do is dismantle any sense of nationalist sentiment and also set a precedent that nationalism is so bad over here, but we already removed it in Libya, and that potentially avoided a big, terrible horror burger. So now we have a precedent upon which to police all of the speech in America as well, which they're already policing speech. Well, in a lot of Western nations, it's already legally actionable. You can get fined or put in jail, like with Count Dankula, the guy who taught his pug dog, ironically, to make a Nazi salute, which it's not. I mean, that kind of bothers me that they say it's a Nazi salute. It's really just the dog raising up its paw. I mean, it's not that complicated or anything. And it's funny because, you know, he says, Sieg Heil, and the dog puts up its paw. It's, you know, like a shake hands trick, except instead of saying shake hands, he says Sieg Heil. And that's what makes it ironic and funny. But yeah, dude got put in jail for that, and there's a big trial about that. And the guy is a cuck himself. He's totally anti-Nazi. The whole reason he did that is because he thought, oh, look at how cute this pug is. I'm going to make him do the most ugly thing I could think of, which for him, in his opinion, the Nazi salute is very ugly. So to connect these dots together here, if a human rights group goes and advocates for certain things in changing policies, say in Libya, where there's a lot of instability, then in the context of something that's really chaotic, it might make sense to take extreme measures. Then the litigious would take that precedent and then come over to America, or they would have their friends in America, their friends in America, take a look at that precedent and say, oh, we already did this over here in this really chaotic situation. So to prevent any chaos from happening, we must also limit the rights and limit the speech of people in America as well, people in the West. And like I said, in the West, our speech and our ability to address important issues is already significantly choked down on. So you should just be aware that international human rights groups is a stupid name. It's just one of these fake names that it sounds really nice and good and everything to cover up for nefarious purposes. It's a very common trope that we see in subversive elements of society, giving themselves really nice names so that no one suspects that they have bad intentions. It's a very 1984 communist bullshit way of going about things. But what do you expect when you're dealing with subhuman rats? You just need to be able to call them out for what they are, and then you'll see how they cower and shrivel away.